So in some of my past videos for braiding and knot tying, I've conditioned the lace with a homemade leather conditioner, which really alters the appearance and I think makes it look quite nice. Instead of this real light color, it really brings out the burgundy color of that leather, and so on and so forth. But it also makes the leather stick together better and pull into shape and form better around what you're trying to do so that it's more pliable and works better. And what I've been using as a homemade leather conditioner is what's in this jar. It's basically a 1-to-1 mixture of beeswax and olive oil. It's even what it says on the lid. So this jar is getting close to empty, and I used up the other jar already that I had. So I've been looking around at trying to make some more, and I've come up with a few other possibilities of things to add into it. And so I'm going to try a new recipe. Again, I'm going to be doing equal parts, but I'm going to have 4 ingredients in this one instead of just 2. The 2 worked, but I'm hoping to get something that'll be a little bit more waterproof and shiny and more of a leather conditioner and waterproofer, as well as what I'm going to use it for with the braiding. But right now in this double boiler is important for safety's sake because all this stuff is flammable. You don't want to heat it directly. I've got some coconut oil in here, about 8 ounces of it, about 8 ounces of all this stuff. And to that I'm going to add some olive oil, again, equal parts. Once it all warms up, it should mix together. I'll also be stirring it pretty good whenever it gets warmed up. So both those are things you can buy at the grocery store. Pretty easy to come across. Of course, I'm going to put beeswax in it as well. I've got these little, they were from muffin cups, is why they're shaped like they are. I've been processing a bunch of beeswax lately. And so I've got some leftovers here that I just poured into these muffin cup things, and I'm going to throw those in there. I've got, again, about 8 ounces here of beeswax. Now, obviously, 1-to-1-to-1 ratios, you don't have to bother with trying to make a batch this size. This is just the size batch I'm making. And that's all done by weight. I use this little scale to weigh these things out because beeswax is very difficult to weigh or to measure volumetrically. You pretty much have to weigh it. All these things have a pretty similar density though, so I'm not too concerned about weight to volume measurements. Now what I have in this container is the other thing that could be hard to come by locally. This is pine rosin, rock rosin it's called. It's a lighter colored one. It's not real light, it's the kind of yellow stuff. It is technically food grade material. So everything in this is really food grade. So this could be used on wooden items and cutting boards and various things like that without any harm. And of course, I'm going to use it on leather stuff. But yeah, this is, you can find it sold as rock rosin or pine rosin. It's really kind of some cool stuff. But it's just from exactly what it sounds like, pine trees. It's pine sap that's had the turpentine cooked out of it. And this is the solids that were inside of it. And it's sold for a bunch of different uses. So you can find it online, but finding it locally could be tricky. Alright, now I've got to wait for this to all warm up and melt and mix together and cook a little bit. So I have to stay here for that because, of course, like I said, everything's flammable. Don't leave this alone. Don't heat it directly. Don't burn your house down. Don't burn someone else's house down. Those are the rules. 2 very important. So I am now very carefully doing a little bit of heat on direct heat because I brought it up to boiling in the double boiler and some of the pitch is still not melting. Pitch, pine rosin, all of these are kind of terms that are used for it, has a melting point that's somewhere just above are at the boiling point of water. So it sometimes melts right around what the double boiler can do, but then there's other times that you have to go ahead and put it in another pot and bring it up just a little higher. But you gotta be careful not to get it above a flash point of any of these things. So if it starts to smoke at all, go ahead and take it off the burner. Have something around that you can cover it with so that you can put a fire out if it does happen. And this is also why I like to use these hot plates instead of a stove, is because it's pretty easy to control these and then to just take it off the heat real easily and not have to worry about damaging anything. If I spilled this on my stove, it'd be very difficult to clean up. While we're on the subject of cleaning up, this pitch, wax, all this stuff, if you have a heat gun, you can just warm it up, especially these metal pieces, and then wipe it out with a paper towel to clean up any mess that's made with this. Now, of course, if you get it on something that you can't use a heat gun on, it could be problematic. But it's also, while I'm making this, the wax and pitch and everything is all very flammable, and you put it on paper towels, it makes great fire starters. Okay, now that I've got everything melted, I can see all the way down to the bottom of the pot. It's kind of clarified. There's still some gunk in there from the rosin, but I'll call that acceptable. That's probably things that are higher melting point that just don't want to melt yet, which is something I don't really want in there anyway. And then it's just a matter of pouring it into these tins and letting it cool off. Having a tray underneath of it like this is probably a really good idea to catch spills. Now, let's see what that turns into as it cools. So the other ones are still working on cooling, but this one that just had a little bit of in the bottom of it, it cooled to room temperature, and it's kind of a thick, sticky cream, sort of what I expected. Let's see what it works on a piece of lace. Get this piece I had earlier. Soaks in, changes the color like I would expect it to. So it looks like it does a nice bit of polish on it, a little bit more than beeswax normally does. That's probably the addition of the rosin, which is harder, that helps it do that. But both of them should also help really waterproof the leather well. And test that, I'm just going to wet it with a sponge like I normally would. And if you look, you can see the water really beads up well on there. It wipes right off. Now, nothing fully waterproofs a piece of leather. But let's grab the other end of this piece of lace and do the same thing and see what it looks like. So side by side, as you can see, this piece is definitely darker with the polish on it, and it's definitely got more of a gloss to it. mildly glossed. Just a little bit of polish. But when I wet this down, the water spreads out over it. It starts to soak in. See the water spots on it already. So, it's a fairly good waterproofer for leather. Mildly conditions it. It's got enough oils into it to kind of condition it. I think it'll work great for exactly what I'm planning on doing with it, which is kind of finishing lace when I'm braiding. But it'll also probably work really good on finishing wood as well, especially anything, since all of this is food safe materials, anything that's going to come into contact with food. A lot of times I'll use beeswax and mineral oil for that, but this I think would probably be a little bit better finish than the beeswax and mineral oil does. So I'm going to try it on wooden spoons and cutting boards and things like that as well, and see what it does. Well, I got this stuff sitting here. I'm going to come up with another test for it. I'm going to put some of it on my big mallet handle here. Rub it into this braiding and see what it looks like when I do that. As usual, when you go over some of this stuff, you wind up with it getting into the braiding. That is bringing out a nice color. And if I really wanted it to soak in, I could just take, again, the heat gun that I would use to clean this stuff up and warm it up a little bit. But you gotta be careful doing that you don't overheat the leather. I do like what that did. It darkened up that leather a little bit. But it should also have waterproofed it. And gave it, again, just a little bit of a shine to it. Having a brush to get into these areas can help too. I'm just taking and running my thumbnail along them right now, but if you have a fairly fine brush, you can kind of get in there and scrub that a little bit. It's also useful for when you're using saddle soap or something to clean, to get into those spots. But all in all, I think this was a very successful experiment. But that's kind of all I got for this video. Made myself some homemade leather conditioner, balm, cream, I don't know what to call it, waterproofer. But we'll see what it does in some future videos. I'm sure I'll have some other uses for it.